Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to finish off this drawing. So in your file, you should have something similar. You should have something similar to this, right? And the last couple things we need to do is change the line weight, um, and I'll talk about hatches. So in order to talk about hatches, if you could download this file. Um, then I'll start to explain hatches using these simple examples. All right, so I'm going to start off with this left one. I'm going to type in hatch. Saying select curves, boundary, no. I select this. And as soon as I select it and hit enter, I get this little pop-up window. And I can select different types of hatches. For now, I'll just select, say for example, we'll do grid 1. And we'll change the scale, say for example 10, and it'll change the scale of that one and hit OK. So essentially what a hatch is, it's just a pattern. So if you go back and you select it, it's just a pattern of these, lines or solid object. The one thing you do not want to do to a hatch, unless you absolutely have to, is you do not want to explode a hatch. For the reason why, as soon as you explode a hatch, it explodes it into the individual lines that they're made out of, and it's no longer a hatch; it's just a series of lines. So that's just the one thing just to know about. I'm going to delete that. This next example, again, I'll do hatch. Sometimes you have to click select curves or says boundaries equals yes. In this case, I had to do this because these are individual lines. And because I had to do boundaries equals yes, it doesn't automatically fill it in. I have to click inside here. And then again, I can just create the hatch. I'll do a solid this time and hit OK. And now it's just a solid colored hatch. If yours is a different color, it's okay. We'll change that in a bit. Over here under in this next example, again, if you type in hatch, you select the individual lines. What this is doing is it'll find the boundary line, and it'll hatch inside that boundary line. This next example, we'll do hatch. We'll select all those lines. And this one purposely will not work for the reason why, again, what hatch is doing, like in this previous example, it is finding the boundary line, right? So that enclosure. In this case, it can't find it because if you zoom in onto this top right corner, there's an actual gap in here. So because of that gap, it cannot find the enclosure, and it cannot hatch this object. So in this case, you can just draw on a line or use the fillet command, just so that it actually has an enclosure. Now if you type in hatch, it should work. Alright, and a couple of different options with hatch. I'm going to do one more hatch. Boundaries equals yes. I'll select all of these curves. And over here, it's going to say combine regions. So for the first example, I want to say combine regions equals no. And I'm going to click on these individual pieces, or inside these individual boundaries, and hit enter. And I'll keep this one as a solid for now, and hit OK. And then I'm going to type in hatch again. And boundaries equals yes. And I'm going to select these, hit enter. This time I'm going to say combined regions equals no. I'm going to select the same three and hit enter. I'll do a solid hatch again. So in the first example, oops, sorry, repeated it. Sorry, let me do that again. Sorry, I meant to say combined regions equals yes. So I'll click all three, and hit OK. So in the first example, we selected combined regions equals no. So it's keeping these individual hatches as individual objects. But in this example, we did it and said hatches combined hatches equals yes. So wherever these hatches were actually touching, it combined them into one larger hatch. So this could come in really handy is, say for example, if you want to do all your hatches all at once and you make them all solid or some other pattern, you could always come back later and change the pattern by coming over here to properties and clicking on that last icon where it says hatch. And now I can come in here and change the pattern. So I have hatch 1, I set the scale to 10, and it's coming out at a different scale. I can select this one, again 10, and I'll select this one, and again 10. So it just gives you the option to come back and change it a little bit later. All right, so now that we've gone through this, I'm going to select this. I'm going to type in hide. Right. If you want to bring those objects back, so just type in show. The icon is also located right here. Hide objects and show objects. So I can hide those objects. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And this is what we're going to be using to change some of the hatches and some of the line weights. So essentially what I'm going to be doing is this is the file that I'm going to be using to print off of. All right, so what I would like to do is bring in my previous drawing. I'm going to come in here and select the drawing that we just finished and go to Edit, Copy. And I'm going to paste it into this new file. Edit, paste. And it should put it in the exact same location. If yours happens to be right here, just like in my case, I'm just going to move it. Just to move it out of the way. And before we start adding any of the hatches or or changing the layers, I just want to hatch this object up here, this one, and the one that is down here. So I'll start off with this one. So I'm gonna make a new layer. Oh, sorry, this one's set up a little differently, so we'll skip the layer part for now. I'm just going to type in hatch. Select the curves. And when I hit enter, the hatch that I'm looking for, I'm going to do hatch 1. And I'm going to change the scale to say, let's do 200. And I'm going to change the rotation to say, for example, 90, so that it's standing up. And the last thing that I want to do is I want to go to look at this example where it says set base. So normally when you hatch something, it normally picks some corner, some starting location. But what set base will do is you can tell it where you want it to start. So I'm going to click on set base, and I'm going to click on the midpoint of this line. And what it should do is, because I clicked the midpoint, that last distance should be equal to this distance on this side. So I can pretty much, set base is pretty much telling it where the hatch pattern should start. I'm going to hit OK. And for now, whatever color it is, that's fine. And I'm going to hatch this one also. Select boundaries equals yes. So again, I just want to select these 4 edges. And hit enter. This one I'm going to change the scale of it. So instead of 200, let's see. We'll just keep this one at 400. Again, I'm going to set the base just so that it's in the center. And hit OK. So now we have those set up. And the last thing that I want to set up is this hatch that goes across the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by selecting all of these lines across the bottom. And I'm going to join them. All right, and the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, not only am I going to join them, but I'm going to select them and go to Edit, Copy. I'm going to deselect them by clicking somewhere on the screen and go back to Edit, Paste. And when you copy and paste something within the same file, it puts it in the exact same location. So I should have two of the exact same curves. So the reason why I did this is I'm going to offset one of them. I'm going to offset it with a distance of 3 feet, or 36 inches. And I'm going to say cap equals flat. I'm going to select one of them, and I'm going to offset it. So I'm going to use this new offset one that I just made and hatch it. And I'm going to hatch it with, I might have to click inside. I'm going to hatch this one with a solid hatch. Okay. And that offset curve I just made, it was just a temporary line just to create the hatch. I'm going to select it and delete it. Alright, so the last thing I just want to explain with the with hatching, especially with solid hatches. So I'm going to make a temporary line right through the hatch. I'm going to go to my layers. There's a lot of layers in here, and I'll explain why in a bit. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to select this line, and I'm going to put it in the lines layer. Or there's two lines layers. I'll just put it in the red one. Okay, so sometimes when you make lines and hatches, sometimes the line will be above the hatch, and sometimes it'll be below the hatch, right? Like in this case. So normally when you have solid hatches, you want them to be in the back. So just to make sure that they're actually in the back, I'm going to go to drafting. And there's an icon over here that says, it's called draw order. And what this will do is, say for example, I'll select that line. I could bring it to the front or send it to the back. So I send it to the back, and now my line is sent below my hatch. Or I can select the line again and say bring to front, and now my line is above my hatch. All right, so I'm going to do this to my hatch. I'm going to select the hatch and say send to back, just to make sure that this curve is on top of this hatch. So I'm going to close the draw order. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to select some of these lines and trying to match them up to some of these line weights over here. So one thing I'm gonna do just to see what the line weights look like is I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna zoom in over here and say, I'm gonna right click on where it says top and go to print preview. And what it's showing me is different shades of these gray lines, which will essentially be the way that the drawing should look when I print this. Right? So essentially, what I'm looking for are some lines that I'm going to change the line weights of my drawing. All right. So for example, I'm going to select the perimeter of this. Again, I'm just holding down the Shift key. I'm going to zoom in over here and say, okay, that perimeter should probably be, say for example, should probably be like a 0.4 or 0.25. Next, I'm going to come over here to Properties, and I'm going to click on Match. I'm going to match it to 0.4. And I'm going to get this pop-up window, and I'm going to make sure that everything is checked, and I'm going to hit OK. So now what it's done is it's matched those exact same properties of that 0.4. So what it's also done, it's also changed the layer that it was located in. So now it's located in this layer, this architectural detail point weight 2. Alright, so if I go to my layers, there's a lot of layers in here. I'm going to just maximize this a little bit. But here are architectural details, the different layers, architectural detail point weight 2. So there it is. So now it's in a different layer. So I can do the same thing with the others. I'll select these. And this one and this one. Oop. I'll select those and possibly this one. And I'm going to put those in a different layer. Say, for example, I'll put those in this one, the architectural detail point weight 3. So again, I'm going to go back to Properties, go to Match, and match it to that one. And make sure everything is checked and hit OK. So now those have a different line weight. And I'll go in here and just select the rest of these. And I'll put these in a slightly different, thinner line weight layer. So I've selected the rest of those. I'll come over here and I'll put those in, say for example, like a 0.18 or a 0.1. So I go to Properties, Match. I'll do 0.18. And hit OK. So now if I zoom in, I'm getting a closer idea of what this is going to start to look like. I have like different line weight thicknesses. I'm still missing 2 more. I'm still missing these. I'm going to put those in this layer. There's a few of these over here that are dashed. So for example, this architectural detail pattern 2. It's actually a dashed line if I zoom in enough. It's a dashed line. So I'm going to put that in this dashed line. So Properties, Match, click that line, hit OK. And then I'll add my last one. This line, I also need my hatch. So I'm going to select this curve that goes all the way around. And I want to make sure this is a little bit thicker of a line weight, so I'll probably do the top one. I'll do it's a 0.6, match, and place it in there. The actual hatch itself, the solid hatch, I'm sorry, I probably don't want it this thick. But I'm going to do a little bit thinner, or not that thick, I'm sorry. That shade of gray or black. I'm going to just do a slightly lighter shade. Let's see. Match this to maybe this one. Yep, wrong one. Properties, object. Ah, there it is. I clicked the wrong match. This one to, say, for example, this one. Okay. There you go, that's better. So now I've set up all my line weights. And essentially what this is doing, I'm going to go back to my layers. So earlier when we talked about layers, we were talking about you can make your own layers, you can turn layers on and off, you can change the color of the layers. But the other thing that the individual layers also controls, other than the material, it controls the line weight, the color of the line, and the line thickness. So a lot of these are continuous, and some of them are different types of hidden lines. So for example, let's see, scroll down to the bottom. We'll go to the lines layer, the red one. This is the one that we copied, or at least I copied and pasted in here. Alright, so I can click on continuous, and I can select a different type of line type. Say, for example, dashed. And now that changes it to dashed. I can change the diamond, and the diamond is the print color. Right, so I can, instead of it printing red, I can tell it to print gray, for example. And now it should be gray. The last one, the print width, is the thickness of the line. Right, so I can tell it, do like a 1, for example, and now it changes that line weight. So anything on this layer now will have those properties. Dashed, those print properties, dashed, gray, and a line thickness of 1. So the one thing that I want to do, or the last thing that I want to do, is I want to change, say, for example, this line weight. That one is the line weight that I had where it's 0.6. I want to change it so that it's slightly thicker. So one thing I can do is I can go to this layer and I can just change that, right? So I can look for detail 0.81, and if I scroll over, it's black set at a line thickness of 0.6. But I don't want to edit the original, say as an example, I don't want to edit the original layers. What I could also do is I could just make my own layer. So I'll just make a layer, type it, make it, this is my layer, or whatever name you want to give it. And on this layer, I'm going to right click and say match properties. So I want to match the property of this layer. So I want to copy all the properties from one layer to the different layer. So I'm just going to look for this layer. Let's see where it is. Is it a architectural detail 0.81, architectural detail 0.81. I select it and hit OK. And now with my layer, the color's now changed, and the continuous and the line weight, and now this is at a 0.6. Right, so I just essentially copied all those settings. But instead of a 0.6, I want to change this to a 0.8, for example. So I'm going to select it, select that curve. I'm going to put it into my layer. Change object layer. And instead of 0.6, I want it to be a little bit thicker, so I'll do like a 0.9, for example. So now that line weight's a little bit thicker. But again, instead of editing the original layers, I can just copy and paste and start to edit mine. So in the last video, or in the next one, we're going to set this up for printing.